Greetings and salutations. This is David Duford at buylifeinsuranceforburial.com, where I help people like you get affordable final expense life insurance and burial insurance. And today's video topic is the official guide to getting life insurance with bone fractures. So we're going to go into deep detail and describe what your options are for life insurance coverage if you've experienced some sort of fracture recently or in your life, and maybe you're wondering how that will impact your ability to get life insurance. We're going to answer those questions shortly, so let's get started. So first, we're going to start with a quick overview about myself and my company, Buy Life Insurance for Burial, if you haven't viewed any of my videos or read my articles yet. Then we're going to talk about the types of fractures we're going to discuss today, and then answer the question, of course, if you can qualify for life insurance with bone fractures. Then we're going to talk about the types of insurance available to people who have had bone fractures in their history. Specifically, we'll talk about term, whole life, and guaranteed acceptance life insurance. And then we're going to talk about how to apply and then how to go through the next steps. So my name is David Duford. I am the owner of buylifeinsuranceforburial.com. I've been a licensed life insurance agent since 2011. I've helped over 3,000 families with their life insurance needs since entering the business back in 2011. I do other things besides help people with life insurance. I'm also a published author at the present time of 2 books. The one most relevant to you is over there in the lower left-hand corner. It's called The Official Guide to Buying Final Expense Insurance. It's just a quick pamphlet that helps people decide on what kind of life insurance or burial insurance is best for them. I'm also a life insurance agency owner, so I actually take the same material and training and find agents that are interested in helping people like you in their own communities across the nation. And I'm also married with children. At the filming of this, my 4th one will be here anytime, so wish us luck. So let's take a quick overview of what to expect and how to describe bone fractures. So the types of bone fractures discussed today will include the following. So we're going to talk about fractures of the skull. So this would be in any circumstances where there was a bone break or fracture of your head or skull. We're going to talk about what your availability of coverage is there. We're also going to talk about spinal fractures, and specifically, these are spinal fractures that are you've experienced full recovery from, or perhaps you're in the process of recovering, where you have to differentiate those two. So we're going to cover both circumstances and what you may be eligible depending on both. So let's answer the main question you've got right now, which is, can you qualify for life insurance if you have bone fractures? And the short answer is yes, most likely yes, at least. And the long answer is, it just really depends on your age. It really depends on the product that you're going to get, as we'll talk about in a moment. And it depends on the combination of other health issues. Most people have some main concern they have with their health. Maybe it's bone fractures for you. Sometimes other health issues will play a contributing role about your eligibility to get life insurance. So the bottom line is your options for coverage are unique to you. Ultimately, it's going to take a submission of an application to underwriting to see what you can qualify for. But let's kind of start somewhere to kind of give you an idea if bone fractures are something of serious consideration for you, to give you an idea of what you may qualify for. So again, let's look at some types of life insurance to possibly available if you've had bone fractures. So you want to know what your options are. In this world, there is no one-size-fits-all solution to anything, really. I believe that principle is exactly the same when it comes to life insurance. Not all life insurance is appropriate for everybody. Some life insurance options are better than others. So it's important to understand, figure out what your goals are, and then find the life insurance option that suits you the best. So the first question I would have you to ponder and think about is, what do you want a life insurance plan to do for you? Maybe you want your life insurance plan to just simply cover your final expenses. Maybe you're more interested in a burial insurance policy to cover final expenses such as cremation, burial, last debts. So you need to understand, well, what kind of policy would work best, considering the nature of the need. Burial is something that, or death is something that we all experience or will experience at one point. So it's a permanent problem. We'll talk about more about how to solve permanent problems later. Perhaps there's also an income replacement problem. And you see this both in younger people as well as older. If you are younger and you're working, imagine if for a moment you die. A car wreck takes you out. You contract a serious form of aggressive cancer. I've had people I've known that have found out they had cancer and died weeks later. Imagine for a moment that happened to you. Now imagine what would happen to your family. How would they go on? How would they live? Could they live on the available income that your spouse makes? Could they live on the available savings that you left behind? Could they pay off any large obligations like maybe the mortgage you're paying? If the answers to these questions are not a certain 100% yes, then a life insurance policy to cover for an income replacement plan is an excellent idea. And this sometimes can be a permanent problem or it can be a temporary problem. It can be temporary if you're prudently saving for your retirement and you need a term insurance plan, for example, or a temporary plan to cover until you are retired and have saved adequately over your life. Or it can be a permanent problem if you are retired and your lifestyle requires two incomes. And if your spouse passes away, how will you retain your lifestyle the way you want to? So it depends upon the nature of where you are in your life, what your goals are, and what you're experiencing. Also, debt repayment, like I mentioned momentarily, perhaps part of your worry is if you die, the mortgage will need to be paid. It could not be paid, and you may lose your house to foreclosure. So with a mortgage payment protection plan, you can actually, upon passing, have enough money to pay that mortgage off and alleviate the financial burden from your surviving family of paying that bill and knowing that your family has a house to live in. Also, you got to consider, of course, what budget do you have in mind? Most of the people I work with are older, and it's always important to have some level of consideration towards what they can afford. So I believe that the best type of option for life insurance is to find the one that's easily affordable. It's a shame when somebody buys a life insurance plan and ends up dropping it because it was just too expensive to begin with and they figuratively bit off more than they could chew. So we want to make sure whatever you buy, it's easy for you to pay. You're confident that it's not going to cause financial concerns of paying too much, and it does the job that you want to. And you can do that. You want to work with somebody who can shop around. That's what I do as a broker, and to try to find you a plan that accommodates both of these goals. Gets you a life insurance plan that accomplishes your main goal, but also doesn't break the bank either. So there's three types of life insurance options available if you've had bone fractures in your history. And which of these options, again, is going to depend, as far as which is best for you, will depend upon what your goals are, but also the severity of the bone fractures and the length of time that has passed since the actual event. So let's just go over each of these options. The first is going to be term life insurance. The second's permanent life insurance. And the third is guaranteed acceptance whole life insurance. And what we're going to do now is take a look at how each of these plans work, and then we're going to show you some specific concerns that we're going to have that we have to address in order to get an idea of which of these plans you may be eligible for. So first, let's take a look at term life insurance for people who have had bone fractures. So the idea behind term life insurance, if you've never heard of term life insurance, is that term life insurance offers coverage for a temporary period of time. Term life insurance is not permanent. It is the cheapest way to get the most coverage per dollar of premium. So why is that the case? Because you have a high likelihood of outliving it. Life insurance companies design term insurance so that when they take somebody on and they approve them for coverage, that the likelihood is fairly high, in some cases 97-98%, that people will outlive the coverage and not actually die before it goes away. Also, in conjunction with that, the premiums are level. That means the prices do not go up. The premiums do not go up for the term life insurance with the vast majority of the products that are out there, at least the ones that I offer my clients across the country. So it's really a great way to get a lot of coverage for a low amount per month. Now, there are drawbacks to everything in life, of course, no different from term insurance. You could outlive the coverage, right? So you may take a plan out for 30 years as a young person for an income replacement plan, and then reach the extent of that or the end of that plan, and you may still have some income to replace. Maybe you didn't do a good job saving, or maybe things turned against you in your retirement plan and you have less than you'd like, and you may need your insurance that much more at that point. So there's no perfect answer, in the sense that if you want a lot of coverage, then to get that through term insurance, you're faced with a situation where at the end of the day, you may have to sacrifice the fact that you possibly may outlive it. It's not going to be permanent, because as we'll get here in a moment, permanent insurance is another option, but much more expensive. Also, you got tougher underwriting than simplified issue whole life. So with a term insurance plan, usually they're going to have a farther back look back on your health history. They're going to look back a multitude of years. They're going to look closer at the details of your health to determine insurability. And for a lot of people who've had health problems, it may be more difficult to get a term life insurance plan. So it just depends upon this. Again, the severity of the bone fractures that you've experienced. My experience has been, if you've had a bone fracture and you're fully recovered, you may be eligible for coverage at a decent price. And then same thing for narcotic usage. Some people have to take pain medications in order to manage their pain associated with the bone fracture. And under certain circumstances, you may qualify for coverage. Sometimes people are concerned, will they even qualify if they are taking some sort of narcotic? So what we're looking at here is just a quick review of the types of fractures that you may experience, and to give you an idea of what one particular company may qualify you for, depending on the severity of the fractures. So we're first just looking at generalized fractures. We'll get to skull fractures in a moment, but the main thing we're looking at here is spinal fractures that are currently repaired. Those typically are going to qualify for some sort of standard pricing. As long as there's no complications, as this list says, then typically you're going to go ahead and be okay for some sort of coverage. Usually, not always. Again, it depends on your unique health history. I'm not saying that you will qualify 100%. Nobody can say that until an underwriter reviews it. Also, if you've experienced, if there's the potential for more surgery, then most likely your policy will be postponed until that surgery is completed. So, for example, if there's more, for example, in this situation, if you've had some internal fixation device recommended or planned to help deal with spinal fracture, they'll want to see when that's installed. And that'll go for any sort of follow-up surgeries that you may be experiencing in the future. Most insurance companies are going to say, look, you need to go through the surgery first, and then they'll consider you. Then also here, current or frequent narcotic medication usage, it's just going to depend on your individual circumstances, with a possibility of getting some kind of rate up. Also, if you've had cerebral concussions or fractures related to cerebral injuries, again, what they're going to look for is a period of time to pass before they look at insuring you or offering insurance coverage. Most likely what's going to happen is, they want to see if your full recovery has been well over the last several years before they consider you for some sort of coverage. Again, the further along in the time period it's been, the more likely that you're going to be eligible for something. So time factor is important with any sort of fractures of the skull. So what I'm showing here now are some term life insurance pricing for plans that may potentially make you eligible for coverage. Again, don't take these as suggested companies to go with. It's going to take a complete underwriting evaluation with you before we can say for sure what your coverage ability would be. But we're looking at males first, then females at $250,000 in coverage for a 10-year term. And these are going to be preferred plus rates. It may be lower than that. It just depends, again, on your function or ability to be qualified. So we're looking at a 40-year-old, excuse me. Now let's go ahead and look at a 50-year-old for pricing on $250,000 in coverage, 10-year term. mid-20s to mid-30s. A 60-year-old is going to be mid-60s to upper 70s. A female $250,000 10-year term is going to be in the teens. A 50-year-old female non-smoker $250,000 10-year term plan, mid-20s to upper 20s. And a 60-year-old female 10-year term, $250,000 in coverage, female, mid-40s to mid-50s. Now, of course, this is all subject to underwriting. You can also get higher lengths of term life periods of time. 10 years is just what I'm showing you. You can also play with that amount of coverage up or down. You can get less coverage, you can get more coverage, you can get longer periods of term, you can get less period of term. Of course, price will be impacted whether or not you smoke. The idea behind this is just to show you some starting points of what you may potentially be eligible for if you apply for coverage. Now that we've covered term life insurance, let's talk about the opposite of term, which is whole life insurance coverage for people with bone fractures. So whole life insurance offers what I call permanent protection. So when we say permanent protection, it means there's no potential for a cancellation because of an age or health increase. Now, one of the benefits with permanent protection is that also the rates never increase. So the only, I'll put this little asterisk here you see next to universal life. We're going to talk about universal life plans shortly, but this only option here for permanent coverage where the rates are guaranteed not to increase as long as you pay the same premium, what's called guaranteed universal life plans. They act very similar to whole life insurance plans. They're not whole life insurance plans technically, but they're designed to mimic what whole life does and some of the advantages. So I'm going to include them into this, but I just wanted to make sure that this little distinction is made when we talk about universal life plans. I'll be specifically talking about guaranteed universal life plans because they match some of the benefits I like in whole life plans very well. There's a potential for first day full coverage. So with whole life insurance, a lot of plans will fully cover you from the first day if you qualify. And like I said from the beginning, the big difference between term life and whole life is permanent coverage offers permanent coverage. As long as you follow out what the schedule is for premiums, they're contractually obligated not to cancel you because of age or health. So as long as you meet the premium requirements, then you don't have to worry about that. Now there's some drawbacks here. Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to see in a minute, you're going to have a higher premium amount per dollar of coverage than term. We're going to look at some smaller whole life amounts because, again, we've got to go back to our goals. Most people choose permanent protection because they want to have final expense coverage or perhaps some level of income replacement. So what we're probably going to be looking at here are people who are over 50 and for less coverage. So I'm going to just show you most likely a $50,000 plan. We can go much higher than that, of course. And I'm going to show you both simplified issue and then also guaranteed universal life plan if that's something you qualify for. Now, there are some non-med and fully underwritten whole life guaranteed universal plans that will have similar underwriting standards compared to term insurance. But the thing is that we also have what's called simplified issue whole life insurance. And all this gobbledygook, to be honest with you, what really matters to you is there's products that are easier to get potentially quality coverage for than other products. But a lot of it just depends on your underwriting circumstances. So I mention this because with permanent protection, there's a little bit more underwriting flexibility. If your severity of your spinal fractures is recent and it is very high in severity, there's likely the option for some sort of what we would call simplified issue product to give you a little more leeway. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the pricing you may be eligible for a whole life plan and simplified issue. Okay, again, to restate, we're looking at $50,000 in coverage. First, we're going to start with simplified issue whole life. Now, these are plans with looser underwriting relative to other companies or other products. And but in exchange, the prices are a little bit higher. So if you price-wise don't like what you see, hang around. I'll show you the difference when we look at a guaranteed universal life plan, which acts very similar to this particular type of insurance and will allow us to see the potential for higher coverage, also for a better price. And also, again, look, we can do even down to $5,000 or $10,000 in coverage. I'm just starting with $50,000 because what I'm trying to keep in mind here are what it's going to cost to bury somebody, but also to factor in for final expenses. So just keep that in mind. We're just going to look at a 50, 60, and 70-year-old male and female non-smoker for $50,000 in simplified issue coverage for whole life, and then guaranteed universal life as well. So here's 50 years old male, $50,000. Here's a 60-year-old male for $50,000 in coverage, and a 70-year-old male for $50,000 in whole life coverage. Here's a female age 50 for $50,000 in whole life simplified issue coverage. Here's a 6-year-old female for $50,000 in whole life simplified issue coverage. And here's a 70-year-old female for $50,000 in whole life coverage. Now we're looking at a guaranteed universal life plan if you were eligible for a preferred, standard, or rated plan. I'll specifically point out the Sagicor companies here because these are the ones that I like to use a lot. As you can see, the price difference is tremendously different than what you would see with the other plans, to the point of being about usually a half to a third of the cost, but it retains all the same benefits as before. So we're looking at female coverage for a 50-year-old. Now let's take a look at a 60-year-old female. And again, the price difference here between the products you're seeing is just going to ultimately come down on your underwriting. Again, the point is to show the contrast in pricing and what you may be eligible for if you qualify, and just how much more you can get in coverage relative to a simplified issue plan. Here's a 50-year-old male for guaranteed universal life plans with Sagicor. Here's a 60-year-old male, guaranteed universal life plan, $50,000 in coverage. And here's a 70-year-old male pricing for $50,000 in guaranteed universal life coverage. So last on the list here is guaranteed issue whole life insurance for people with bone fractures. And again, I just want to note before we get into this, this is just for the most severe cases only. And I would only recommend this course of action if we've literally exhausted all of our other options and there's no other choice. So don't take this as being the way to go. This is just the backup, last choice, trump card if nothing else works. So guaranteed whole life issue insurance works like this. There's no questions ever asked because of age or health, and but the premiums never go up and the coverage never cancels due to health. So it's a guaranteed issue, and you get what you get, and you get the advantages of whole life. But the downsides is that there's no natural death coverage for the first 2 years of the policy. You are covered for accidental death from the first day, and many times the max of coverage is $25,000. You can't get more than that. I can help you, but there is a limitation in coverage and length of time in which the coverage is effective. Let me give you some pricing on what this would run for $10,000. I'm just going to show a 50, 60, and 70-year-old again. We can go all the way up to 85 if necessary. So here's a 50-year-old $10,000 plan. I'll point out Gerber Life and American General, specifically the 2017 rates and the AIG American General rates. Those are the most current ones. These are the most competitive that we have to offer as brokers. 60-year-old $10,000 male, you're looking at $63 and change for both. And for a 70-year-old male, you're looking at the 90s for $10,000. For a 50-year-old female, you're looking at the mid-30s. For a 60-year-old female, you're looking at the mid-40s to low 50s. And for a 70-year-old female, you're looking at the upper 60s to low 70s. So as we wrap up this program, my goal here is to really give you the information necessary to determine if insurance is appropriate for you. Hopefully you believe that. If you've gotten this far, you know it is. But also to help you determine what kind of plans are best for your goals, whether it's covered for final expenses, income replacement, mortgage protection. There are all sorts of options available to you that you may qualify for. And ultimately what you're going to have to do, as I've expressed a multitude of times, is to simply apply to see what the company is going to offer you, to see how the insurance is going to be issued, and to see what you're eligible for. So here's a process to do so. So applying is very simple. You want to pick an agent you want to work with, and hopefully I've made my case to nominate myself to you, and I'd love the opportunity to help you out with what I've just shown you and to get you hopefully some kind of coverage to cover if you've got bone fractures. And second, after I were to listen to your goals, figure out what you're looking for, it takes me just a few minutes to give you an idea of what it's going to cost, what it's going to run. And then once you're accepted, the next process is to simply apply over the phone or the internet. It's very rare I would ever visit you. Everything can be done electronically in most cases. It usually takes a couple of days or weeks, depending on what kind of coverage you're applying for, to get your coverage potentially approved. And then several weeks later, you get your policy in the mail, and that's it. Many circumstances, we do not require an examination. Examinations are usually optional at these levels of coverage that we're looking at, but sometimes they're required. It just depends, but many times it's not. So here's the next steps. If you're interested in qualifying for life insurance, visit my website. You can go to buylifeinsuranceforburial.com and you can grab a free quote. I do ask that you message me first. You can do that by clicking the contact box or the one at the top or the bottom and send me a quick message, or just call me. The best way to reach me is 888-626-0439 to speak with me live. And it just takes me 5-10 minutes really to give you an idea of what you're eligible for, give you an idea what it's going to run, and then you can decide for yourself if it's something that makes sense for you. If you like this video, please leave a comment, like the video, also subscribe if you found the information useful. And thank you so much for watching. Take care.